After cooking a big dinner for 14 of my in-laws, my wife's brother slapped me on the back and said, "Every family needs a punchline. Thanks for making the rest of us look like winners." My daughter nearly spit out her drink, laughing, and added, "Dad's like a wet paper towel." Then my wife leaned back, smirked, and said, "Honestly, he's more like a Roomba. Quiet, programmable, and only useful when there's a mess." They all cracked up while I stood there holding the serving bowl, sauce dripping down the side, smiling like it didn't sting. Yesterday, that same wife and her mom showed up at my place crying, begging me to talk. I'm throwing this story out here on a throwaway account because my main one's got too much personal info and, well, it's about to get ugly. But to explain why they were at my door, we need to rewind to last Saturday night, when I finally saw things clearly for the first time in 15 years. I've always been the one in the kitchen. That's just who I am. While everyone else is watching TV or scrolling their phones, I'm roasting, chopping, baking, planning meals that take days of prep. Not because anyone asked, but because I genuinely enjoyed it. At least I used to. Last weekend was my brother-in-law Nicholas's 45th birthday, and I went all out. 3 full days of prep. I made handmade pasta, prime rib slow roasted to perfection, the kind that costs more than my car insurance, and a chocolate lava cake that honestly deserved a standing ovation. 14 people packed around our dining table, inhaling the food I'd spent days putting together. I was bringing out the final dish when Nicholas smacked me on the back, hard enough to send sauce spilling over the edge. That's when he hit me with the family punchline comment, grinning at the table like he just won an award. Everyone burst out laughing. Not a little chuckle, real gut-busting laughter. My 17-year-old daughter Josephine even added her jab. "Dad's like a wet paper towel." That got even more laughs, but what really cut deep? My wife's joke. "He's more like a Roomba," she said, her voice full of fake sweetness. "Only helpful when there's a mess." The whole table lost it. My mother-in-law was wiping tears from her eyes. My nephew was pounding the table. And I just stood there, plastered smile still on my face, holding the bowl like a waiter that nobody tips. Here's the thing about being the joke. You don't always notice it happening. It just becomes background noise. And after 15 years of being their go-to punching bag, I had convinced myself it was all harmless, that it was just how this family showed affection. But that night, something cracked. Maybe it was hearing my daughter join in. Maybe it was Stephanie's complete lack of concern for how I might feel. Or maybe I'd just hit the end of the line. I served the rest of dinner like nothing happened. I smiled through dessert. I nodded at all the compliments about the food, sprinkled between the jokes about how I'm basically their personal chef/housekeeper. I even cleaned up afterward, while they lounged in the living room like royalty. That night, I lay next to my wife while she snored away, scrolling through old photos on my phone. Holiday dinners I'd cooked, birthdays where I made everything from scratch, anniversaries where I recreated the meals from our first dates. And in every single picture, there I was, smiling, that same dumb, hopeful smile, like a golden retriever waiting for someone to notice. I've never been the confrontational one. Stephanie always handled the tough stuff, but sometime around 3 a.m., I made up my mind. I wasn't going to be their joke anymore. Sunday morning, I got up early like always, made coffee, and waited for Stephanie to stumble in looking for caffeine. I told her I was going to the store. She barely glanced up from her phone. Instead of going to the store, I drove to the bank. I pulled out exactly half of everything in our checking and savings. No more, no less. I wasn't trying to be spiteful. Just proving a point. Then I headed to my sister Heidi's place. She's always been the only one who really saw how they treated me. Last Christmas, Nicholas made some crack about me being domesticated, and Heidi snapped. She actually stood up and called him out. Of course, everyone laughed it off, but I remember her face. She looked at me like, "Why are you still putting up with this?" And honestly, I didn't have an answer, until now. When I told her what happened, she didn't even hesitate. Offered me her guest room immediately. I stayed the night. By that afternoon, I'd found a one-bedroom place across town. Nothing fancy. Just clean, quiet, and with a decent kitchen. I signed the lease digitally, paid first and last month's, rent plus the deposit. All from a new account I opened that morning. I left one thing behind. A note on the kitchen counter that said, "Find someone else to be your punchline." Then I turned off notifications. By that evening, I had 47 missed calls and texts, 23 from Stephanie, 15 from Josephine, the rest from in-laws. I replied to just one. I texted Josephine, "I love you, but I need some space right now. We'll talk soon." Monday morning, I called my buddy Austin. He's been through a rough divorce and knew what I needed to hear. Met him for breakfast and he gave me a crash course. Document everything. Don't misuse joint funds. Don't badmouth your spouse to your kid. All basic stuff, but critical. I took the week off from work, said it was a family emergency. Not a lie. I spent Monday closing things down, setting up my new life. Transferred all my personal bills to the new account, opened new cards, canceled joint subscriptions. Sorry, Netflix. Stephanie can pay her own now. Tuesday night, I was halfway through making dinner when my phone started buzzing again. My mother-in-law, Frances. I let the first 6 calls go to voicemail. 7th time, I caved and listened. "James, this is ridiculous. Whatever's going on, we can fix this as a family. Stephanie's a wreck. Josephine doesn't understand why her dad would just walk out." Walk out? That's rich. After 15 years of cooking, cleaning, and being the family's emotional punching bag, now it's abandonment? Instead of calling back, I sat down and opened my laptop. I started putting together a file, screenshots of texts where Stephanie mocked me, photos from events where I'd prepped everything but somehow still got left out, and old therapy notes where I tried to make sense of why I never felt valued in my own home. By Wednesday morning, that file had a title: Why I Left, 15-Year Overview. I emailed it to Frances, Nicholas, and a few other close relatives who were at that dinner. For a few hours, nothing. Then the phone lit up again. Nicholas said, "Dude, it was just a joke. Don't be so sensitive." Frances said, "I had no idea you felt this way. We need to talk in person." And Stephanie? "How dare you air our personal issues to my family? This is humiliating." Not one word of apology. Not one. By Thursday, it was clear Stephanie realized I wasn't crawling back. Her tone completely shifted. Suddenly, it was all, "I miss you so much, and I didn't realize how much you actually did around here." Apparently, she and Josephine had cereal for dinner because neither of them knows how to cook. Yeah, that hit a nerve, but not in the way she hoped. If anything, I felt this strange sense of satisfaction. Let them feel a piece of what I carried, for years. Friday morning, I met Austin again, this time to discuss a more formal separation. Nothing final yet, just a basic framework. He drew up a draft, nothing harsh, but honest about who actually kept our household running. That night, I got a voicemail from Stephanie. She sounded panicked. She'd just had her card declined at the grocery store. Turns out, she never noticed I'd been the one paying that bill the whole time. Welcome to reality. By Saturday, exactly 1 week after dinner, I felt better than I had in years. Heidi came over and I cooked her dinner. Nothing fancy, just pasta carbonara and a salad. As we ate, she raised her glass and said, "To my brother, who finally remembered what he's worth." I almost lost it right there at the table. Then came Sunday morning. Doorbell rang. It was Stephanie and Frances, both of them standing there with makeup-streaked cheeks, clutching each other like they were at a funeral. I hadn't planned what I'd do when they finally found me. A part of me wanted to shut the door in their faces. But I'm still me, even if I'm not their floor mat anymore. I let them in. My place is basic. A one-bedroom with an old stove, and a fridge that sounds like it snores. Frances looked around like I was living in a bunker. Stephanie kept dabbing her eyes with a tissue that had clearly been dead for hours. I offered them water, because I'm not a monster. Plus, I had nothing else. 3 eggs, butter, half a block of cheese, and a 6-pack in the fridge. Real separated dad vibes. Frances started in with, "We've been so worried," which really meant, "We're annoyed you made us uncomfortable." I didn't say anything. I've learned the power of silence. After 45 seconds of awkward quiet, Stephanie cracked. She started talking fast, how the jokes weren't meant to hurt, how it's just how her family shows love, how she didn't realize I took it so seriously. I've heard this song before. I could recite it word for word. When she finally stopped, I asked her, "If Nicholas said that about you, would you have laughed?" Her face twisted like I'd just hit her with a riddle from outer space. Frances tried to jump in, saying every family has its own way, and maybe I was just too sensitive. Classic Frances, twisting the story so they come out looking like saints. That's when I pulled out my phone. I hit play. I'd recorded the moment at dinner when they joked about me being a Roomba. Not the whole meal, just that brutal part. Something told me I'd need proof. As the audio filled the room, all the laughing, the sarcasm, the cruelty, neither of them spoke. Stephanie looked stunned. Frances just stared at the floor. I didn't yell. I didn't gloat. I just stood there and let them sit in the reality they tried to deny. When the clip ended, Stephanie looked at me, eyes wet, and whispered, "So what happens now?" I said, "Now? Nothing. I'm here. You're there. We figure out how to co-parent. That's it. I'm done being the joke." I walked them to the door. Stephanie paused like she thought I'd stop her, ask her to stay, say I'd changed my mind. I didn't. I just closed the door. Then I made toast, sat on the couch, and watched the sunlight hit the wall. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't heroic. But for the first time in 15 years, it was peaceful, and it was mine. Their faces went from defensive to frozen to downright ashamed. Frances just stared at the floor like she was hoping it would open up and swallow her whole. When the recording ended, I looked them in the eye and told them this wasn't just about one dinner. I'd been saving moments like this for years, not out of spite, just out of survival. When people constantly talk down to you or make you the butt of the joke, you start keeping receipts. I had text screenshots, emails, even birthday cards that looked sweet but carried these little jabs. My personal favorite? "Happy birthday to the man who proves even good kitchen skills can't make up for a lack of ambition." Nice, right? That's when Stephanie dropped the first bomb. Apparently, Nicholas had been coming over to their place every night, telling her I was just going through a midlife meltdown and would come crawling back once I remembered how lucky I was. Even worse, he'd been feeding Josephine lines too, telling her that sometimes men need to throw tantrums to feel important, and she should just let me cool off. Then came bomb number 2. Turns out Nicholas wasn't doing so hot. He was in serious financial trouble, like about to lose his house kind of trouble. Mr. Investment Genius had apparently made some sketchy choices and was drowning in debt. His own wife didn't even know. Stephanie only found out because he'd tried to borrow money from her just 2 days earlier. I looked at Stephanie and asked her straight, "What do you want from me? An actual apology or just your house husband back? Your chef, dishwasher, therapist, punching bag?" She started crying again, but it didn't feel fake this time. She admitted that for years, she never really thought about how her words landed. That seeing that file, the one I'd sent the whole family, made her feel like she was watching herself from the outside for the first time. And she hated what she saw. Frances stayed quiet. then finally said something that honestly shocked me. She looked at me and said, "I watched my husband treat me the same way for 40 years. I thought, that was just marriage. I should have said something." Damn. I wish I could say we all hugged it out right there, that I forgave them instantly and we were healed. But that's not how this works. I told them I wasn't coming back, at least not right now, maybe not ever. If there was any chance, to fix what was broken, it'd take serious work. Counseling. All three of us, Stephanie, Josephine, and me. They left looking stunned, but something told me they actually heard me this time. That was Sunday. Monday brought its own drama. Was microwaving a frozen burrito in the break room at work when Nicholas showed up out of nowhere like a bad dream in an ugly tie. No clue how he got past the front desk. He launched into some man-to-man nonsense about how real men don't walk away from family when things get hard. This coming from a guy hiding a financial sinkhole from his own wife. I let him finish, then casually asked how his investment portfolio was holding up. His face went white, and he started fumbling about private family business. I just smiled and told him I'd gladly talk about my marriage once he explained to his clients why he moved their money into risky investments without full disclosure. I didn't even know if that part was true. But from his face, I had a hunch. I wasn't far off. He didn't say another word, just left. Later, I heard he ran straight to Francis to complain that I'd threatened him. I didn't. Facts aren't threats. Tuesday, I got my first actual text from Josephine that wasn't full of eye rolls or attitude. She asked if we could grab coffee over the weekend. Just talk. No promises. She said she was thinking about stuff. That's something, right? Wednesday, the reality check really hit Stephanie. She left another voicemail, frustrated, saying her card got declined at the grocery store for the second time. Apparently, she never realized I'd been handling all the bills. I'd made it look easy for so long, she assumed everything just worked on its own. Welcome to adulthood, babe. Thursday, Austin came by with the final draft of the separation. Papers, not cruel, just fair. A clean 50-50 split, with a clear acknowledgement of my unpaid labor. Cooking, cleaning, raising Josephine, managing both sides of the family's drama. Austin said to give it a few days before sending them over. Let it sink in. Like a good marinade, some truths need time to set. Friday night was tough. Josephine had a lacrosse game. I've never missed one before. Usually, I'm the guy awkwardly cheering way too loud while trying not to be embarrassing. Instead, I had her favorite post-game snacks delivered with a note. Proud of you always. Love, Dad. Austin's kid is on the team too, so he went and told me later that Stephanie, Francis, and Nicholas were all there. Miserable. Josephine scored twice. Didn't even celebrate with them. Small win, but I'll take it. The weekend brought something. I never expected. Nicholas's wife called me. We've never been close. She always laughed along when they made fun of me. But she sounded scared. Said after what I'd said at work, she started digging. Found statements hidden in Nicholas's home office showing they're nearly bankrupt. And unlike Stephanie, she didn't know a thing. I actually felt bad for her. She didn't sign up for this. Was stronger than pride, just this once. So Tuesday, at 2 sharp, I walked into Nicholas's office. His assistant looked startled to see me, like she'd just seen a ghost in jeans and a hoodie. Nicholas came out of his glass-walled office looking like he hadn't slept in days, shirt wrinkled, tie askew, that fake confidence he usually wore like armor now chipped and dented. He didn't even bother with small talk, just gestured me, inside. I sat down, arms crossed, waiting for whatever performance he had planned. But he didn't perform. He looked down at his desk and said, "I think I screwed up." That was it. No dramatic monologue, no excuses. Just a quiet admission that probably took everything he had to say out loud. He went on to tell me that, after I confronted him, his wife started digging. She found everything: account statements, letters, debt notices. The house is 2 months away from foreclosure. Clients are starting to ask questions. He said he didn't come to ask for help, which I appreciated, but he did say something unexpected. You were never the joke, James. I was just too insecure to admit I envied you. That hit weird. I didn't forgive him, not then. But I also didn't blow up. I just told him he needed to come clean, to everyone. His wife, his kid, his clients, and most importantly, to himself. As I stood to leave, he said, "For what it's worth, you standing up? It helped more people than you know." I nodded once and left. No handshake, no promises, just quiet. Wednesday was uneventful, and honestly, that felt like a gift. I worked. I came home. I cooked myself dinner. I sat on my tiny couch, watched reruns of nature shows. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was waiting for the other shoe to drop. Thursday morning brought an email from the school, Josephine's counselor. She wanted to schedule a joint session with the three of us. Stephanie had already agreed, Josephine too. They were leaving it up to me. I replied that I'd be there. I didn't know what to expect, but I figured if my daughter was willing to do the hard thing, I could be brave enough to sit in that room with her. Friday night, I went grocery shopping like a normal person instead of meal planning for 14 ungrateful relatives. I bought what I wanted, stuff for one, some snacks, and a fancy frozen pizza I didn't have to share. When I got back to my place, there was a card slipped under my door, just my name on the front in Josephine's handwriting. Inside was a short note. "Thanks for still showing up. I love you, Dad." I sat on the floor of my tiny apartment, half laughing, half crying, and ate that stupid pizza while thinking about how much had changed in 3 weeks. Not everything was fixed. Some of it might never be. But I wasn't invisible anymore. Saturday afternoon, I met Austin at the park. We walked, talked about everything and nothing. He told me he was proud of how I handled everything. Said most people don't make it out of that kind of dynamic without losing themselves entirely. I didn't know how to respond, so I just said thanks and offered him half my sandwich. That night, I lit a candle, played music, and cooked myself dinner from scratch. Not for anyone else, just for me. Garlic butter salmon, roasted veggies, a little glass of wine. I sat down and didn't rush. I took my time. It felt like peace. Sunday came with a different energy. I didn't dread it. I used to hate Sundays, prepping meals, steeling myself for the coming week of jabs disguised as jokes, fake smiles, performative dinners. This time, it was just another day. I did laundry, cleaned my little kitchen, and even took a nap in the afternoon sun. Around 6 p.m., I got a call from Josephine. No drama in her voice. She just asked if she could come by to drop off something. 20 minutes later, she showed up with a drawing, me in an apron, holding a frying pan like a superhero shield. It said, "My dad, stronger than he looks." She laughed when I got choked up. Monday morning came like a fresh page. I got up, made coffee, and checked my calendar. Therapy session was in 2 days. The house where all this started was now up for sale. Stephanie confirmed that over text. She and Francis were still at Grandma's, trying to figure out next steps. Nicholas, I later heard, finally told his wife everything. They're in counseling now, too. Who knows where it all goes from here? But for now, I'm okay. I'm standing. And I'm not anyone's punchline anymore. I'd barely wiped my eyes when the doorbell rang. And of course, it was Nicholas. Standing, there in a wrinkled coat, holding a cheap bottle of wine and looking like someone forced him to be polite. He shifted awkwardly when he saw everyone sitting around the table. I didn't invite him in right away. Honestly, I stood there for a second just watching him squirm. Then I stepped aside and let him through the door. He gave a half-hearted, "Happy Thanksgiving" to the room, and everyone kind of nodded, unsure what this was supposed to be. He placed the wine on the counter like a peace offering and said, Can we talk for a sec? I glanced at the others, then walked with him into the hallway. He started in on how he'd been thinking about everything. About the dinner, the fallout, the consequences that finally caught up to him. He said he'd called a financial planner, started real therapy, not the YouTube kind, and had even confessed the whole situation to his wife and daughter. He didn't cry, thank God, but there was this quiet desperation to his tone that felt different, more human. Then, in a moment I didn't expect, he said, "I'm sorry, James. I treated you like crap. I made fun of you to feel better about myself, and that was pathetic. I don't expect forgiveness. I just didn't want to let another holiday pass without at least trying to own it." I nodded. I didn't say, "It's okay," because it wasn't. But I did say, "Thank you." And that was enough. We walked back in, and he joined us at the table without fanfare. Nobody clapped. Nobody made a speech. We just passed around the mashed potatoes and kept eating. It wasn't perfect. The turkey was still weirdly undercooked, and the cranberry sauce was somehow both too sweet and too sour. But it was the most real Thanksgiving I've ever had. And for once, I didn't feel like the background character. I felt seen. Later that evening, after the dishes were done and everyone had left, Josephine stayed behind for a bit. We sat on the couch, both full and sleepy, and she leaned her head on my shoulder. "Do you think we'll ever be a normal family?" she asked. I laughed quietly and said, "Probably not, but maybe we can be a better one." She smiled, nodded, and then promptly fell asleep like she used to when she was little. I sat there a while, listening to her breathe, thinking about how everything had fallen apart. Then somehow started stitching back together in the weirdest, messiest, most human way possible. I'm not saying everything's fixed. It's not. But I'm not invisible anymore. I'm not the joke. And I didn't have to scream or threaten or burn everything down to change the narrative. I just had to walk away long enough for them to feel the silence I'd been swallowing for years. Funny how that works. The guy they used to call a Roomba might have just rebooted the entire system. He showed up in a plain sweater, bottle of wine, in hand, and to my surprise, his wife was with him. She gave me this small, genuine smile like she was trying to show she got it now. The apartment was already full with 4 of us crammed into the tiny space, but I invited them in anyway. Nicholas glanced at the turkey, slightly mangled from our group effort, the lumpy mashed potatoes, and the sugary stuffing Josephine had mismeasured. Then he looked at me. He took a deep breath and said, in front of everyone, "James, I'm sorry for the dinner comment, for years of acting like I was better than you, for turning your own family against you when you finally stood up for yourself. I was wrong. I'm trying to do better." His wife reached over and squeezed his hand. That little gesture said a lot more than words could. Later, she pulled me aside and told me Nicholas had come clean about everything. The finances, the way he'd treated me, all of it. They were in both financial and marriage counseling, downsized their home, made a budget. She was now an equal partner in rebuilding the business. We sat down and ate that Thanksgiving meal together, awkward at moments, honest at others. Nicholas asked questions about cooking techniques, and this time they didn't come laced with sarcasm. Francis told me my apartment was surprisingly cozy. Stephanie did the dishes, without me saying a word. Small things, normal things. But after everything, they meant more than I could put into words. When everyone left, Stephanie hung back at the door. She looked at me and asked quietly, "Does any of this change things? Are you ready to come home?" I told her I didn't know, that I appreciated the effort everyone was making, but trust doesn't snap back. It has to rebuild slowly. I said, I was open to couples counseling, seeing where we stood after a few sessions. She nodded, disappointed but not angry. Then she asked, "Would you help us with Christmas dinner?" Not make it, just teach us how. Before I even thought about it, I said yes. That was a month ago. Since then, Stephanie and I have had 4 counseling sessions. They've been messy and uncomfortable and revealing in ways I didn't expect. Josephine and I have been doing dinner, twice a week, sometimes at my place, sometimes grabbing something out. Nicholas and his wife are still working through their mess, but I'll admit, he hasn't cracked a single joke at my expense since Thanksgiving. Last weekend, I went by the house to grab more of my stuff. It looked different. Stephanie had rearranged the living room. A few new photos were up, ones I'd taken on trips. The kitchen was tidier than I'd ever seen it. On the fridge was a meal plan, written in Josephine's handwriting, with YouTube cooking links scribbled beside each meal. Stephanie asked if I wanted to stay for dinner. She'd made lasagna using my old recipe. It wasn't perfect, undercooked noodles, watery sauce, but she'd made the effort. So I stayed. We ate and talked, not just about schedules or Josephine's school, but about us, about where we'd failed each other, about what we still wanted and whether those things aligned. As I left, she asked if I'd consider moving, back home after the new year. Not as the family's chef or emotional sponge, but as her partner. Josephine's dad, an equal. I told her I'd think about it, and I am. Yesterday was Christmas. I spent the morning with Heidi, who's been my constant through all this. Then I went to Francis's for dinner. They'd cooked it themselves, with only minor help from me. Nicholas and his wife were there too. Quieter than usual, but more at peace somehow. After dinner, Nicholas raised his glass and said, "To James, who had the courage to walk away and the grace to let us try to make things right." They all raised their glasses. No one laughed. No jokes at my expense, just respect. I don't know what comes next, whether I'll move back or keep this little apartment longer, whether Stephanie and I will truly rebuild or eventually let each other go, whether Nicholas's humility is real or just a phase. But I do know this. I'm not the family punchline anymore. And honestly, that feels better than any revenge plan I could have dreamed up.